Hey, welcome. If you've ever tried to memorize the Quran, you probably know it can feel like this huge, overwhelming task, especially if you feel like you're doing it all on your own. So, what if I told you there's a structured, traditional method that's been perfectly adapted for today's world? We've taken a look at a teacher's practical guide that promises exactly that. Let's see how it all works. All right, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to talk about a really common struggle that almost everyone faces. Then, we'll get into the principle of guided learning that actually solves it. From there, we'll walk through a super practical memorization method, step by step. We'll also look at why pronunciation is so crucial. And then we'll wrap up by talking about how to make your own journey a real success. So first up, let's dive into a feeling that I bet is pretty familiar to a lot of you. That sense of isolation, of trying to memorize the Quran completely by yourself. Yeah, this quote just sums it up perfectly, doesn't it? It's that feeling of being adrift, with no one to guide you or even just keep you accountable. It's such a common roadblock. But here's the thing. The solution isn't just about trying harder. It's about connecting to a really core principle of learning. And that leads us right into this foundational concept in Quranic studies. See, the answer to learning alone isn't just to grit your teeth and push through. It's to tap into this powerful tradition of guided learning that's been around for centuries. The principle is called at-talaqi, and what it really means is the traditional way of receiving the Quran directly from a teacher. Think of it like a living chain of transmission, passed from the mouth of the teacher to the ear of the student. This is how the text has been preserved so precisely for over 1,000 years. Okay, so you might be thinking, that's great for the old days, but how on earth does a person-to-person principle like that work in our digital age? It almost sounds like a contradiction, right? But the key is to adapt the tools, not to abandon the principle. And here's the cool part. The principle of receiving knowledge directly, that doesn't change. We just have modern tools to do it. You can follow live correction sessions on YouTube, you can join a Telegram group where people practice their recitation, or you could find a study partner online. But this last one, listening intently to a master reciter, this is the absolute cornerstone of the method we're about to dive into. You're still receiving it directly, just through a different medium. All right, so let's get into the meat of it, the part you've been waiting for, a clear, practical, step-by-step memorization method you can literally start using today. It all boils down to this really powerful 3-step cycle. First, you listen. You just immerse yourself in the sound by playing the verses from a master reciter, like Sheikh al-Husari, at least 20 times. Next, you understand. Just a quick read of the tafsir to get the meaning. And only then, after all that, do you move to the final step. Memorize and link, using a very specific technique to connect the verses together. And this is where the magic really happens. See, what most of us do is we repeat one verse until we've got it. Then we move on to the next. But we forget to build the bridges between them. This method is all about building those connections so they become second nature. Okay, so what does this linking technique actually look like? Let's walk through it. First, you recite verse 1 10 times. Simple enough. Then, you recite verse 2 10 times. Now here comes the crucial linking step. You recite verses 1 and 2 together 5 times. Boom, you just built your first strong connection. Then you just repeat that pattern. Recite verse 3 10 times on its own, and then recite all 3 verses together 5 times. See the pattern? Every new verse you learn actually makes the old ones stronger. You know, memorizing the words is one thing, but reciting them correctly, well, that's a whole other ballgame. And this is where that very first step, listening to a master reciter, really shows its value. Let me show you what I mean with a couple of examples. Okay, take the letter kha. It's so easy for a non-native speaker to make it a thin sound, kind of like the K in take. But the correct sound is much heavier. It's more emphatic, coming from the back of your throat. It's a difference you just can't really get from reading a book. You have to hear it to learn it. Or how about this one? The letter sods. A super common mistake is to just pronounce it like a normal S. But the correct sound is more emphatic. It's a heavier, fuller sound. You see, these are the subtle but absolutely vital details that separate just reading words from true, beautiful recitation. And this is exactly why the whole method kicks off with listening, not just reading from a page. When you listen over and over, your ear naturally starts to pick up on these details. It keeps you from memorizing mistakes, and trust me, unlearning a mistake you've memorized is way, way harder than learning it right the first time. Okay, so the method is solid, it makes a ton of sense. But how do you actually start? How do you make this a real, consistent part of your life without just getting completely overwhelmed and giving up? And the answer might just be the single most powerful piece of advice in this entire guide. Don't try to memorize a whole page or a whole surah. The goal is small, consistent, and totally achievable. Just 5 verses. Because at the end of the day, this journey isn't a sprint. It's a marathon built on small, daily wins. Think about it. 5 verses that you know perfectly, pronounced beautifully, are so much more valuable than a whole page you've just rushed through. This is what makes the journey sustainable and, honestly, a lot more rewarding. So really, the question isn't, can I do this? It's, when will I start? By using this simple method of listening, understanding, and linking, the whole journey becomes not just possible, but manageable. It all starts with just one verse. So, what will your first 5 verses be?